The airport buzzed with travelers rushing to catch flights, announcements echoing through the terminal. In the middle of all this, 16-year-old Amara James stood alone near Gate 42, holding a boarding pass and a small backpack. Her flight to Washington, D.C. had been delayed, and she quietly sat near the window, watching planes come and go. She wasn't loud, she wasn't causing trouble, she was just waiting. But she stood out, tall for her age, with deep brown skin and long braids. Amara looked out of place among the mostly older, white business travelers in the terminal. A few passing glances turned into lingering stares. Then, a TSA agent walked by slowly. Then again, finally, a middle-aged airline staffer in a red jacket approached her, frowning. "Excuse me," the woman said stiffly. "Can I see your boarding pass?" Amara blinked. "Sure," she said politely, and handed it over. The woman barely looked at it. "This doesn't look right. Are you flying alone?" "Yes," Amara said, confused. "My dad booked the flight for me. I fly all the time." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Wait here." She turned and walked away. Amara shifted in her seat. People were watching. She could feel it like heat crawling up her neck. She looked around, feeling smaller by the second. 10 minutes later, 2 airport police officers showed up. Double quotes Ma, single quotes M. "Stand up," one of them said firmly. "We need to speak with you." "What? Why?" Amara's voice trembled. "What did I do?" "Let's go," the officer said, his tone flat. "You're not under arrest, but we need to confirm some things." People started filming. Phones came out, but no one helped. Amara's voice cracked as she said, "Please, I didn't do anything. Just call my dad." The officer didn't answer. As they walked her through the terminal, people whispered. Some assumed she must have stolen a ticket. Others thought maybe she was a runaway. A few just watched silently. She was taken to a back room. There, they asked if the ID she had was really hers, if she was really flying alone, if the name on the ticket was even hers. She explained again and again. "My dad booked the ticket. I'm just trying to go home." "Why didn't you call him when we approached you?" one officer asked. "I tried," she said, "but I was scared." Outside, the red-jacketed airline staffer watched through a window, arms crossed, satisfied, but she had no idea what was coming, because at that very moment, a black SUV was pulling up to the terminal entrance, and inside that SUV was someone no one at the airport ever expected, someone who didn't need a boarding pass, someone who would turn this entire situation upside down, someone who made airport security stand up straight when he entered. Wrong place. Wrong. Skinder Airport was alive with noise, the echo of luggage wheels over polished floors, the distant chatter of families, the sharp, robotic voice of the PA system calling out flight numbers and gate changes. It was just past noon, and the terminal buzzed with the usual chaos. Yet, in the midst of the busy crowd, Amara James sat alone, still and quiet. She was 16, traveling from Atlanta to Washington, D.C., after spending the summer with her aunt. Her father, a very important man she rarely spoke about, had arranged everything. Her flight was on time, her documents in order, and her bag packed neatly. She had done this before. She was used to being alone in places like this, but still, airports made her nervous. Amara wasn't dressed like most of the other passengers. No expensive luggage, no business suit, just jeans, sneakers, and a navy hoodie with Howard University printed across the front, her dream school. She wore a backpack that had one frayed strap and a keychain with her initials. That was it. She sat near Gate 42, looking out through the large windows at the planes being loaded and unloaded. Her boarding pass was in her hand. Her phone was on low battery, but she had texted her dad before her last message sent. "At gate. Flights in 40. Love you." She sighed and leaned her head against the window. That's when she noticed the woman in red watching her. Amara tried not to think much of it at first. The woman was middle-aged white, wearing a red blazer with the airline's logo and a name tag that read Cheryl. Her eyes were sharp, her lips thin and tight, like she had just eaten something sour. Cheryl walked by once, then again. On the third pass, she stopped. "Excuse me, young lady," Cheryl said, folding her arms. "Can I see your boarding pass?" Amara sat up straighter and handed it over. "Are you flying alone?" Cheryl asked, already frowning. "Yes, ma'am," Amara replied calmly. Cheryl squinted at the boarding pass. "This is a first-class ticket." "Yes, ma'am," Amara said again. "And your parents bought this?" "My father did," she replied, now uncomfortable. Cheryl paused, staring at her a second too long. "Wait here," she said, turning on her heel and walking away. Amara watched her leave, a cold knot growing in her stomach. She glanced around. People were beginning to stare. A man in a business suit whispered something to his colleague. A woman 2 seats over pulled her child closer. Amara's throat tightened. She picked up her phone and tried to call her dad. "1 bar, no service, .. she whispered. "Come on." Tapping the phone. Then 2 airport security officers approached, 1 white, 1 Latino, both in blue uniforms. One had his hand resting casually on his belt. "Young lady," the Latino officer said, "we need you to come with us for a quick check." Stood slowly. "Why? What's going on?" "We need to confirm your identity and your ticket status. Please, come with us." "I haven't done anything," she said, voice shaky. "I'm just waiting for my flight." "Please, we're not arresting you," the white officer said, but his voice was hard. "We just need to clear something up." She looked around, desperate, hoping someone would speak up. No one did. Tears were beginning to form in her eyes. "I swear," she whispered, "I didn't do anything. Just call my father. Let's go." They led her through the terminal. The walk felt like it took forever. Phones came out. People filmed. Few murmured. Others just stared. The red-jacketed Cheryl stood by the gate, arms crossed, satisfied. They brought Amara to a small holding room. The walls were bare. A metal table sat in the middle with 3 chairs. Cold, gray, silent. They made her sit. Then they started asking questions. "What's your full name? Who bought the ticket? Why are you flying first class? Do you have a parent or guardian we can speak to?" Amara answered each question as best she could. "I'm Amara James. My father bought the ticket. His name is Anthony James. I've flown alone before. He always books everything. Can we reach him?" One officer asked. "I tried to call, but I don't have service," she said, her voice cracking. "Do you know what he does for a living?" "He works for the government," she said quietly. They exchanged looks. "In what department?" "I'm not supposed to say," she whispered. They leaned in. "Why not?" "He told me not to talk about it unless it's an emergency." One officer chuckled. "Sweetheart, this is starting to feel like one." Amara's eyes brimmed with tears. "I didn't steal anything. I didn't lie. My name is on the ticket. Please, please, just let me go back to my gate." The door opened. Cheryl stepped inside. "I just want to say," she began. "I knew something was off." She was sitting there looking, well, suspicious. First class, alone, no adult with her. It didn't sit right. The officer nodded. "We're just confirming things." "Well," Cheryl sniffed. "I hope she understands we take safety seriously. There are rules." Amara couldn't take it anymore. "Why did you assume I was lying?" she burst out, tears falling now. "Because I'm black. Because I don't look rich. I did nothing wrong." The room went quiet. Even Cheryl hesitated. "Your attitude doesn't help." "Young lady," she said sharply. Amara was shaking. She wiped her face and looked away. The officers left for a moment, taking her documents with them. She sat there alone, curled into herself. Minutes passed. 10 minutes. Then 20. Outside the room, something changed. A group of uniformed airport security personnel suddenly straightened their backs. One ran a hand through his hair. Another adjusted his collar. 2 TSA agents looked nervous. Then the heavy doors near the security checkpoint opened. A tall, broad-shouldered black man in a dark tailored suit stepped through, flanked by 2 agents in sunglasses. His badge hung from his neck. He didn't stop to ask for directions. He walked with purpose. Every officer stepped aside. Every stare followed him. His voice, calm but cutting, rang through the hallway as he approached the holding room. "Where is my daughter?" Inside the room, Amara looked up. She heard the door open, and then she saw him. "Dad." Anthony James, deputy director of the FBI, stepped in. His eyes locked on hers. Relief flooded her face as she stood and ran to him. He wrapped his arms around her. She was safe now, but the look in his eyes wasn't relief. It was controlled fury. He turned toward the officers behind him and said in a tone like ice, "Who made the call?" When power walks in the air in the small holding room shifted the moment Deputy Director Anthony James stepped inside. Not with sound, but with silence, so complete that it drew every breath in the room into stillness. He wasn't a man you ignored. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Behind him stood two men in dark suits who wore no visible weapons, but looked as if they didn't need any. The lead officer who had questioned Amara cleared his throat and straightened his shoulders. "Sir, Anthony," raised one hand, and the officer froze mid-sentence. "I asked a simple question," Anthony said with calm, steel-toned precision. "Who made the call?" Cheryl appeared behind the officers. Her face paled when she saw the man's badge swinging against his chest. She stepped forward hesitantly. "That would be me," she said, attempting to sound justified. She didn't look like she belonged in first class. "I was only doing my job." Anthony turned his eyes on her. His voice remained calm. "And what exactly made you decide that?" "My daughter, who had a valid ticket, identification, and was sitting peacefully, did not belong." Cheryl opened her mouth, but nothing intelligent came out, only nervous words arranged into excuses. She mentioned security protocol, passenger behavior, and how she had a feeling. "A feeling," Anthony repeated. "That's what justified detaining a minor. That's what justified involving airport security. That's what justified humiliating a young black girl who was doing nothing wrong." He stepped closer, but not aggressively. Calm, controlled. "Did she yell?" "No." "Threaten anyone?" "No." "Violate any airline policy?" "No, sir." "But then your feeling was the only evidence you had. Am I correct?" Cheryl nodded slowly, suddenly aware of the phones outside the room. Cameras were now everywhere. Someone had recognized him. The news was already spreading across the terminal. Amara watched silently. Her father was a quiet storm. This was the man she had grown up with, come at home, careful in public, but always aware, always watching. One of the officers spoke again, trying to regain control of the room. "Sir, if we'd known who you were," Anthony's eyes snapped to him, "you would have treated her with respect only because of me. What about the young girl with no badge behind her name, no title, no reputation? Would you have kept her in here another hour?" No one answered. Anthony stepped aside and motioned for Amara to come. She walked to him slowly, but her steps grew more confident with each one. He placed a gentle hand on her back as he guided her out of the room. But he didn't leave the airport yet. Instead, he turned around one last time. "I will be filing a formal complaint. I will request footage, audio reports, and when I do, I want every second of this incident available. You detained a minor. You racially profiled her. You made my daughter afraid in a place where she should have felt safe. Do you understand the seriousness of what you've done?" Cheryl nodded no. Her face had turned ghost white. The officers avoided his eyes. Anthony said nothing more as he and Amara stepped out into the terminal. Something strange happened. People began to clap, not loudly, not all at once, but scattered. One man stood, then another. A woman near the gate wiped her eyes. It wasn't just applause. It was recognition. It was support. It was shame being handed back to the ones who caused it. Amara's hands were still trembling. "Come on," Anthony said gently, guiding her toward the exit. "We're not flying commercial today." They stepped into the sunlight outside the airport. His black SUV waited, doors open, engine running. Inside, Amara finally spoke. "Dad, why didn't you tell them who you were right away?" Anthony looked at her with the kind of sadness only a black father could feel in moments like this. "Because it shouldn't matter who I am. You were enough, and they should have seen that." She blinked fast to stop the tears. "What if you hadn't come?" "I always come," he said softly. "Always." Amara leaned into her seat as the SUV pulled away from the curb. Back inside, the gate agent stood alone now, unsure what came next. But what she didn't know was that this story wouldn't end quietly. It would make its way through headlines and hashtags. It would force the airline to issue a statement. It would spark outrage. It would open conversations in places where silence had lived for far too long. Because when power walks in wearing a badge, people listen. But when that power walks in wearing pain, the whole world watches. And Amara James had just become the face of something bigger than she ever expected. The investigation nobody wanted by morning. Amara's face was everywhere. A teenager once unknown to the world was now on every trending page, every local news ticker, every phone screen scrolling through headlines. Not because she asked for it, and not because she wanted attention, but because someone had decided she didn't look like she belonged, and because her father walked through an airport door and refused to stay silent. At home, Amara sat in her bedroom, knees pulled to her chest, phone vibrating non-stop beside her. Messages poured in, strangers offering support. Friends from school who had seen the footage. Journalists requesting interviews. Bloggers reposting the video with captions that made her stomach turn. Some called her brave. Others questioned why she had a first-class ticket in the first place. Some cheered for her father. Others accused him of using power to intimidate. But the truth rested in her chest like a weight no one could see. She didn't feel brave. She felt cracked. Downstairs, her father was already working. Anthony James wasn't a man who moved impulsively. He didn't post rants online or scream into microphones. He built cases like structuresbrick.com and Unshakable in his office. He placed a printed photo of Cheryl, the gate agent, beside a report. Her employment record was clean but shallow. No prior disciplinary actions. No formal complaints. But that wasn't what mattered to him most. He clicked play on the security footage. Amara was in view, calm still, doing nothing but breathing in a place that saw her as a threat. He rewound it and played it again, then again, watching for patterns, watching the crowd, watching Cheryl's eyes. There was no threat, no cause, just bias wrapped in a red jacket and authority. His personal phone buzzed. The name that flashed across the screen was not one he ignored. Director Wallace Anthony answered. "We have a situation," the director said, wasting no time. "The footage is spreading faster than we can control it. The agency is getting heat. Some people are calling it political. Others think you're making this personal." Anthony stayed silent for a moment, letting the weight of the words hang. "It became personal the second they made my daughter feel like a criminal for existing," he said. The director sighed. "We need you to step back from this. Let PR handle it. Your badge complicates things." Anthony stared at the wall. His hands remained steady. "I'm not stepping back. I'm stepping forward, and I'm doing it as a father first. Be careful, James. You're poking at systems bigger than one bad employee. I know exactly what I'm poking." The line went quiet. When he hung up, he stood and opened the file labeled Pattern Reports. It was something he had been working on long before Amara's incident. A quiet investigation into racial complaints tied to travel and transportation. He hadn't intended to release it yet, but now the fire was personal. He began drafting a formal letter to the airline's board. He listed not only Cheryl's actions, but the officers who detained his daughter without cause. He demanded full disclosure of their training protocols, complaint records, and incident handling policies. Then he made a second call, this one to an old friend who owed him a favor, not because he wanted revenge, but because he wanted accountability. At school, Amara's story followed her. Whispers in hallways, teachers walking on eggshells. Some classmates treated her like royalty, others like a threat. One boy asked if she was rich now. A girl asked if her father carried a gun. Someone made a meme using a freeze frame from the video, and it spread before lunch. She kept her head down. During sixth period, her phone vibrated again. This time it was a message from her dad. "Can you come to my office after school? Something important." When she arrived, she found him waiting with someone she didn't know. A woman in a dark green pantsuit, hair neatly tied back. A small recorder on the table in front of her. "Amara," her father said softly, "this is Special Agent Ramirez. She's internal affairs. I want you to tell her everything, exactly how it happened." Amara hesitated, but nodded. She sat down. Her voice trembled at first, but with each word, her voice grew stronger. She told them how she was stared at, questioned, pulled away, and treated like a threat. When she finished, Agent Ramirez clicked the recorder off. "I believe you," she said, "and I want you to know this won't disappear into a file cabinet." Amara gave a small nod. She didn't know if she believed that. After she left the room, Ramirez turned to Anthony. "She's strong," she said. "She didn't ask to be," he replied. Ramirez handed him a folder. "This isn't the first complaint against the airline. 5 other cases in 2 years, to involve minors. None made it to the media." He just lit a match on a room full of gasoline. Anthony looked through the papers. "This isn't just about my daughter. This is a culture, and we're going to expose it." Later that night, Amara lay in bed and scrolled through her messages. One caught her eye, a girl she didn't know. Profile picture showed freckles and red hair. "This happened to my brother last year. No one believed us. Watching you speak up made me cry. Thank you." Amara stared at the screen. She didn't reply. She just held the phone to her chest. For the first time since it happened, she didn't feel small. She felt seen, and that feeling changed everything. The silence begins to break the hearing. was not supposed to be public. It was scheduled quietly and deliberately behind a closed conference room on the 9th floor of the airline's headquarters. Far from flashing cameras and loud voices, but word had already gotten out outside the building. Protesters gathered with signs painted in bold colors and sharp words that demanded justice for Amara and for every unseen child who had been made to feel less because of the skin they wore inside. The walls were painted a shade of beige so bland it could erase emotion. At the end of the long polished table sat Anthony James. He wore a charcoal suit with a pocket square that matched nothing but spoke everything across. From him sat the airline's legal team, and Cheryl, the gate agent, who now looked nothing like the authority figure from the terminal. Her blazer was replaced by a plain blouse. Her voice had shrunk. A panel of 5 board members observed in near silence as the session began. Anthony stood and placed a folder on the table. "This is not about one woman and one girl," he said, with measured control. "This is about a system that grants power to those who do not understand the weight of it." One board member leaned forward. "Mr. James, we understand. Your daughter's experience was difficult, but perhaps there was a misunderstanding. We're not here to assign moral failure." Anthony opened the folder slowly and slid forward 5 printed statements, then explained these complaints filed by other families, all in the last 2 years, all involving young black or brown passengers, all dismissed without further investigation. The room shifted. One of the board members looked down, another coughed to fill the silence. Cheryl didn't look at the papers. She stared at the wall. Anthony continued, "We don't need you to apologize with words. We need you to correct your systems, change your training, and admit that racial profiling has quietly taken root inside your gates." No one moved. One argued. The board asked for a recess and left the room. Without a word outside the building, Amara waited in the car, watching the protest grow by the minute. She wore a hoodie pulled low, and her hands fidgeted in her laps. She didn't know how to be a symbol. She just wanted to go back to being invisible and free. But when her father stepped outside and the crowd parted, she saw something in his face that wasn't anger. It was a kind of peace she hadn't seen in weeks. He opened the car door and spoke softly. "They're not ready to admit fault yet, but they're scared." She nodded slowly. "So what now?" He smiled for the first time in days. "We don't wait for them, we move without them." That night, Amara sat at her desk and opened her laptop. She clicked record. Her face filled the screen, her voice low at first, then rising with each sentence. She didn't script her words. She didn't practice her lines. She just spoke. "I never thought my face would end up on someone's phone screen, or that people would chant my name outside an airport. I never asked for this, but maybe I was supposed to feel what I felt so someone else wouldn't have to." She paused and let her breath carry the weight of the silence. "I'm not angry at one person. I'm tired of pretending this doesn't happen, and tired of being told it's not about race when it always is." She uploaded the video before she could second-guess herself. The morning, it had 3 million views. By afternoon, it reached 7. By evening, she had a message from a senator asking to speak at dinner. Her father placed his phone face down and looked at her. "You changed the conversation." She didn't reply. She just ate her rice. Slowly the next day, the airline's CEO issued a formal apology, but it wasn't just to Amara. It was to every family, ignored every voice, dismissed, and every child who had ever been pulled aside for matching a profile. They never chose. A fund was announced for youth advocacy training within airline staff. Cheryl was placed on indefinite leave, pending review. Some people called it a small victory. Amara knew better. It wasn't victory. It was the first brick removed from a wall that had stood too long, and she was just getting started. The backlash burns quietly. The applause did not last long. What began as a wave of support began to splinter by the week's end. Voices, once loud with praise, shifted into whispers of resentments. Some said Amara was being used by her father for political gain. Some questioned why she did not forgive and move on. Others posted screenshots of her video with captions that twisted her truth into something colder than she had ever spoken. She logged off after the third message told her to go back to where she came from. She was born in Virginia. She had never left the country, but none of that seemed to matter when hate disguised itself as opinion. Anthony noticed the silence. He knocked on her door one evening and waited before entering. Shay sat on her bed, knees pulled to her chest, headphones in, eyes fixed on the floor. He sat beside her, not asking for permission, but giving her space. They stayed that way for a long time. Then she pulled one earbud out. "They're turning on me," she whispered. He nodded once, slow and deliberate. "They always turn when truth cuts deep." Amara looked up. "I didn't do anything wrong." "No, you didn't," he said gently, but systems scream the loudest when they start to crack. That weekend, their house was watched by news vans parked across the street, and by strangers who passed too slowly in cars with tinted windows. Anthony made a call and security arrived the next morning, not because he was afraid, but because he refused to let fear grow roots in their home. Monday, a letter arrived without a return address. Inside was a printout of Amara's face with a red X drawn through eye. X drawn through either. Hands trembled as she held it. Anthony took it without a word and walked straight to his office. That night he met with federal cybersecurity agents. The threat was real, now not just public shaming but something colder, something older, something that had haunted men like him for generations. But even with that storm rising, he refused to back down. Amara knew he was carrying more than he said. He was protecting her, not only as a father, but as a man who had stood too long in rooms where he was the only one who looked like him, and the only one not allowed to lose his temper. Week Amara received an invitation not from a school or a network or a sponsor, but from a girl her age from Ohio. Her name was Layla, and her message was simple. "My brother was profiled last year at a train station. They took him into a room for 4 hours because he wore a hoodie and wouldn't smile. He was 14. Thank you for speaking when we couldn't." Amara sat with that message for a long time. She no longer felt like she was carrying her story alone. She had become the voice for 100 unnamed versions of herself, but the more her name grew, the more it reached ears that had power and fear stitched into the same muscle. One night, Anthony came home late, his suit jacket folded over one arm, his eyes darker than usual. He placed a file on the kitchen table. Inside were documents showing someone from inside the airline had tried to access his clearance level at the bureau. Not once, but twice the message was clear: back off, or risk exposure. He sat across from Amara with the weight of history behind his eyes. They don't want change, they want silence. She leaned forward, her voice steady. "Then we get louder." He looked at her with something between awe and sorrow. "You understand what that means, right?" "Yes," she answered without blinking. "It means they're going to try and bury us under what we survived." Anthony reached across the table and took her hand. "Then we build a platform on it instead." Outside the night crept in, cold and quiet, but inside their home the air held something warmer. Not safety, not peace, but resolve, the kind that does not fade with fear, the kind that grows when truth is all that remains. The fire behind her eyes. It began with a headline that turned her name into a weapon. "Teen girl exploits race for fame." She read it twice, then closed the tab without blinking. At school the stares returned, but this time they were different, colder, sharper, full of questions no one asked out loud. Her teachers avoided eye contact except for Mr. Layton, who offered a small nod during class, as if to say, "I see you, but I cannot save you." She no longer used the front entrance. She took side halls and back stairwells, and learned which corners of the building swallowed whispers. Whole it was not fear that kept her quiet. It was the exhaustion of always being strong in rooms that expected her to shatter at home. Her father had changed too. He still smiled, but less, still stood tall, but heavier, still protected her. But now, with cameras on every corner of the house and private security outside the gates, she missed how they used to argue about music and toast, and how much garlic belonged in spaghetti. Now every conversation was lined with quiet strategy. They had stepped into a fire and neither wanted to be the first to blink. One night, while scrolling through hateful comments, Amara stopped on a message from a woman she had never met. It read, "I am 73, and I saw the same thing happen to my grandson in 79. We were silent. Thank you for not being." She read it again, then once more, before setting her phone down and staring at the ceiling for an hour. Silence in her room felt like a storm, preparing to scream. Her father knocked gently and stepped in, holding 2 steaming mugshot chocolate, her favorite. They sat on her bed and said nothing for a long while. Then she whispered, "I want to do something more." He turned to her with quiet interests. "Dart, what a space where kids like me can speak safely, where people listen, where we are not questioned before we even open our mouths." He nodded slowly, like someone listening to thunder from afar, knowing it was already moving closer. She spent the next 3 nights sketching out the idea, a youth platform called Gate 42, named after the place they tried to break her and failed at. Would hold stories, artwork, letters, videos, anything young people wanted to share about their encounters with injustice and silence. Her father helped build the site, her cousin designed the logo. By the end of the week it was live, and the first story uploaded was hers. She didn't edit it or polish it. She wrote it raw, and left it open for the world to read. By morning there were 20 new stories submitted. By night the number reached 200. Some came from kids in schools, some from detention centers, some from quiet towns no one talked about unless there was tragedy. Amara read every single one. She cried twice. Once felt something new rise in her chest that was not anger and not pride, but a mixture of both that tasted like courage. The media returned this time not for scandal but for questions. How did she build this? What did she want? Next who was behind her? Answered with steady eyes and no apologies. I am behind May. I am not a victim. I am a survivor. Girl who was once questioned for sitting alone became the girl people looked to for strength, but strength came at a cost. Anonymous threats poured in. Her school principal suggested she withdraw for her own safety. Her college applications were flagged by systems that did not understand activism as achievement yet. Still she stood when a television anchor asked her during a live segment if she regretted speaking out. She leaned forward into the microphone and answered with a voice that held every name and every story behind Gate 42. I regret nothing except how long we stayed silent. That night she returned home to find a handwritten letter slipped under their front door. No name, no envelope, just ink on paper and 3 short lines. You remind me of the girl I wanted to be. Never stop. You are building a world we only dreamed of. She held the note to her chest and did not speak for a long time, because sometimes the loudest power is the kind that arrives without sound. She belonged all along. The courtroom was colder than she expected, not from the air conditioning but from the eyes watching her from every corner, every bench, every seat. In the back, where suits whispered behind notepads and phones, the airline had finally been forced to face a civil rights hearing 1 year to the day after Amara was pulled from Gate 42. They had offered settlements, they had released statements, they had created programs and filmed apology campaigns, but Amara had said no every time. She was not there for money. She was not there for photo opportunities. She was there for every black child ever told to prove they belonged. Amara walked to the witness stand without looking left or right. Her braids were tied back, her shoulders square, her hands steady. She sat and placed her palms flat on the polished wood, as if anchoring herself to truth. The judge asked her to speak. She did not ask for permission. She began 1 year ago. I sat in a seat I paid for, and someone decided I was a threat, not because of what I did but because of what I looked like. The court stayed still. No coughs, no murmurs, no interruptions. I was 16, I was alone, I was terrified, and what I remember most is not the officers or the hand on my arm or the questions. It was the faces watching me and saying nothing. She paused, but only to breathe. Then came my father, who walked in, not with rage but with reason, and they listened because of his title, not because of my truth. She looked to her left, where Cheryl sat with folded hands and tearless eyes. I am not here to punish a person. I am here to confront a pattern, a pattern of quiet fear packaged as protocol, a pattern that whispers, not you, not today, not here, not ever. She turned her eyes back to the judge. We are told to be grateful for progress, but progress without accountability is anxious. Finished without raising her voice, and stepped down without waiting for response. The building cameras flashed and microphones reached for her. She said nothing. She held her father's hand and kept walking. That night, the court ruled that the airline would be required to undergo federal monitoring for discriminatory conduct and publicly release quarterly reports. They called it a step. Amara called it a doorway. Gate 42 exploded in numbers. Thousands of stories now lived there, raw and real, unfiltered and permanent. Students studied her case in schools. Activists quoted her speeches. A child in Chicago named his puppy Amara. She laughed when she saw the photo. 1 month later, she stood on the campus of Howard University, holding her acceptance letter in both hands, the breeze lifting the edge like a promise. She walked through the gates as if she had always belonged, because she had, because no one could question her seat again, because she had built her own inside a lecture hall. A professor asked the class what courage looked like. Someone pointed to the back, where she had taken the quietest seat in the room, and said, "There, right there, that is what courage looks like." Amara smiled without speaking, because some victories do not need volume. They just need truth carried far enough to echo the end.